Hello, everybody, and welcome to a conversation about tech. This is episode 2, and I got a couple guests. They're both good friend of mine, and they work for one of the biggest software developer companies in the world, is IBM. And together, joining me today, I got Mr. Joseph Marrero that's here next to me, and on the bottom, I got Eric Covener. They both work for IBM. Oh, but Joseph actually works in a company that just was acquired recently by IBM, Red Hat. So if you're hearing this, if you're in the live stream and you want to hear this in the podcast because you cannot join us live on the stream, you can actually download the podcast from any of the audio applications from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. So thank you guys for joining me today. We're going to talk a little bit about your life, how you started on tech, and what you're doing right now. And probably we're going to get some questions from the people that are going to join us in a few, and talk about IBM, Red Hat, and the future about both companies, and just a little bit about centOS and all the stuff that has been happening around with centOS lately. So, all right. Thank you again. And Joseph and Eric, also, they're both gamers. So even though Joseph have a little bit of a passion about electric guitars right now. So, but all right. Thank you. And all right. Let's see who I start with. Let's start. I know Joseph's history because we've known for about like 17 years already. So we know a little bit about each other. I know Eric for, I think, like the last 7 or 8 years, and I met him through Joseph playing video games. But all right, let's start with Eric. Eric, let's talk about you and a little bit about yourself and how do you start on tech and how do you became a software developer and a little bit of your background.
Sure. So currently I'm a senior software engineer at IBM. I've had basically one professional job my entire like post-school life. So I've done like slightly different things in IBM, but really just as long as you've known Joseph, I've been working at IBM. So like 17 years, 15 years in like basically the same area of the company. I got there, I got lucky on a bunch of things. So I had all these opportunities in like middle school and high school to do, quote unquote computer stuff. And I somehow missed every single one. Like I was in these programs where you had electives and you only had a small number to pick from in the 3 or 4 years of middle school. And I managed to do every other one that they had available. Stuff that was, I don't know why I was so averse to it. So we had like a Commodore 64 or Commodore 128D, which was like the successor to Commodore 64. We had some like cheesy programming book that was like, I guess it was a flavor of BASIC, but the things they were having you write were just pages and pages of like manipulating individual pixels to draw graphics. And there was no, even though the thing had like a floppy disk, there was no disk that came with the book. So it was like start your data entry, and it was just all like coordinates and stuff. So I think I had an older brother, so a lot of this stuff came to me just like to happen. Like he might have pushed for something, or like the gaming consoles, the first computer. So the Commodore, we played video games only. And again, like, so my brother loved like old school video game RPGs, like non-action RPGs, like turn-based, like you guys might know. You guys are younger than me. You guys might like Might Magic or Ultima or what is it? Wizard's Quest? What's the semi-modern one? Dragon's Quest.
Dragon's Quest, yeah.
Yeah. So he played stuff like that. So I played stuff like that when I could. And I was on the Commodore, and that stuff had like no requirements because it was all like, it looked like Minecraft style graphics. You would just, be on some crappy board, and then you would have an encounter. But it was all like the gear and, RNG for your damage and stuff like that. So we played a ton of those, graduated to consoles. I dodged all this stuff that I could have gotten early exposure on to computers, missed it all. Dropped out of high school, worked in a deli, like basically stocking shelves, like barely, more glorified than that. And then I went to like a 2-year degree program because I couldn't. So like basically when you get a GED, it's equivalent, but the college looks at it as if it was the worst high school in the country, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're still so they said, okay, we'll accept you into a 2-year program at this satellite campus off in central Pennsylvania instead of the nice campus at Penn State, the main one.
Yeah.
So I got a 2-year degree. I got super lucky with an internship, and then I just was able to transfer and start the 4-year degree. Almost failed out of it twice. And then when I went to apply to internships at the little career fair at the main campus, there was a guy from IBM there, and he's like, I handed my resume, and he looks at it, and he's like, "Oh, you've done work on mainframe before. Like, where did you do that?" And I go, "Oh, well, this campus they started me at was so behind that instead of PCs or Solaris or whatever, we did our programming on a remote mainframe. So we did COBOL and assembly and all that." And he goes, "Okay, do you want an internship?" Because nobody that started at the good campus had any of that experience, and his stuff was on mainframes. So I didn't have to come back a second day. It's usually one of those deals where you go the first day to get like an appointment for a half-hour interview, and he's just like, "No, see you in December for your internship. Nobody else is going to have mainframes." So because of dropping out and going to a crappy campus, I had the experience to get that internship. And then at the time, this was like 2000, 2001, they were still highly focused on like getting people in the door. So if you were an intern, the return offers, it was like a high percentage because they were fighting against all these other people taking people away. So once you were kind of in there, as long as you weren't terrible, getting a return offer was like really, really common. So then I had like my pick of these offers from IBM, it's like basically when you're a manager at a company like IBM, you might want to hire 15 people to get something done, but your boss's boss doesn't have money for that.
Yeah.
But then they go, "Oh, well, there's a special program. If they were an intern, that's different. That comes from a different bucket."
Yeah.
So I was able to get on that, and then I had a crappy job for 2 years that I didn't love, and then I switched to start working on IBM's Apache-based server, which I liked, and I just basically stayed on there and branched out from there for like the next 16 some years, and that's where I am now.
Yeah, it's like, so whoever's just tuning in, like Greg just tuning in on the live stream, and whoever's hearing this in the podcast, as you see, everything is not roses. Got a guy that had a tough high school time. He dropped out of high school. He worked at a deli.
Smelled like fish.
Yeah.
Still got the IBM.
So, and then did you see he took an internship on not one of the biggest colleges in Pennsylvania, got an internship on IBM, and he's been on IBM since. And he's one of the senior developers right now on IBM. Now, here on my left, I got Mr. Joseph Marrero, good buddy of mine, and he has not a similar story, but something close about how, because I know his story, I know how he went to college, got out, put a PC store like I had on the time also. That's how we actually met. And then he went back and finished his master's degree in one of the most prestigious universities in Puerto Rico that people might know those guys that work there because most of them are in the NASA or are engineers. But he actually was able to get a job at IBM. Then he went to another company next in the area where he lives. Then he went to Red Hat. And that was actually his dream, to work at Red Hat. But like I know his story, I want him to tell all of you his story by himself. So thanks, Joseph, and tell us a little bit about how you started and your passion with tech.
So I think I've been pretty lucky. My mother got me like a Nintendo I think it was a Super Nintendo or a original Nintendo when I was, I don't know, maybe in first grade or kindergarten. And there's where my gaming love started, right? I spent way too much time playing all that kind of stuff. And whenever I had friends, I think in eighth grade, talking about the games in PC and this and that, my grandmother got me a compact Presario. It was an AMD processor with 400 megs, 400 megahertz, and I think it was something like 128 megs of RAM. And I was so excited and started, opening applications, trying to find games to install, getting all those little like CDs from all the magazines in the grocery stores and playing the random demos that I could play with my rig, right? And I have this friend, that from the same town that told me that if I really wanted to know computers, I needed to be a hacker. And to be a hacker, I needed to use Linux because Linux was a hacking tool. So I went into EB Games and got Mandrake 7.2, installed it, and surprise, surprise, I could not get into the internet because you need a special driver, you need to have a special
PPPD?
card.
Was that still modem?
Yeah.
You needed to configure PPPD?
Yeah, exactly. And you needed not a Win modem like they used to call it. It needed to be a hardware modem, which were a little bit more expensive, and my machine didn't have. So I started, just booting into Linux to try to understand it and say, how I'm going to hack people with this. It just looks like Windows, but a little bit different. And when I finally got internet set up, because I bought a special modem that I found the drivers for, I spent like a week trying to build the drivers for it. I was like, I just learned a lot of stuff just trying to solve this single problem. And as soon as I got to the internet, I felt like I accomplished something. And I think that was like the hook. Like, well, if you really put effort into something, you can accomplish it no matter how hard it looks, right?
What year was this, approximate?
Oh man, 2001, 2000?
Yeah. If you got your sound card and your network card working in 2001 on Linux, you're basically Richard Stallman at that point.
Yeah, I remember that he was telling me that every time that he needed to put something new hardware into the PC, and he was running Fedora or Ubuntu, and he had issues, and he was like, I have to build a driver, and he was just hours and hours sitting and trying to build a driver for it. And then after that, he was like just literally linking me the pages because of him, this guy right here, I started working in using Fedora and Ubuntu, and I went into open source for like a while. I was using open source, and if I wanted to use Windows, I was just downloading Wine in Ubuntu and making an image and use some of the programs from Windows on the computer. But yeah, he was like, oh, I'm working, but he was just literally making a driver.
Yeah, it just took forever. I don't know. I think I was lucky. Like there's back then, if you ask questions in chats and like in IRC, people will sit down with you and help you through it. And I think, people were like easier to talk to. And I think part of that is there was no much information out there in forums and things like that. And I guess people got burned out. Now you go and ask.
It helped that you made your nickname Stephanie.
No,
that's what you got to do if you're not getting help on IRC.
Yeah. It was like, who's Stephanie in IRC, and then he's like, can I talk to you? And then, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a fun experience, and that was like I was like in 9th grade, I think, or 10th grade. And when I graduated, for some reason, I decided to go and and study music instead of computers because I started playing guitar and I was in love with it. So I said, well, I think I'm going to make a living as a musician. So I went and did 2 years of studies in music. But instead of practicing, I was like installing Arch, installing Gen2, which if you guys know a little bit about it, it's like hours just to get your system running. With Ubuntu, you take, I don't know, 20 minutes.
But it's not optimized, Joseph.
Yeah, it's not optimized for your architecture.
You build it for 1 year and then it runs really fast until they update something. And then you build it for another year.
Yeah. It's like right now I got a few of the guys are always following me and watching my videos, and we are part of some of the other podcasts. Like it's like Aditya is saying right here, like this one right here. Like forums nowadays are a cesspool of trolls and people who criticize and not offer no actual help.
It's too easy.
Yeah.
It's too easy to get on Reddit. In my day, when I was a young man, we had news groups.
Yeah.
And it was hard, and nobody's mom was on there. Right? Like you said, if you could get onto Usenet, you know, for non-binary purposes, you know, they used to have a phrase on Usenet called like the endless September or something like that. So like back in the day when people would go to campus, they would go to college in September and they would get their machines set up, and then there'd be a whole bunch of new idiots online who didn't know what they were doing, didn't know etiquette, couldn't type, couldn't reply correctly. And then AOL came out and they called that the endless September because now there were just, you know, a million people a day joining. And
you got mail.
Yeah, shitting all over everybody's forums. In the early 90s, my whole thing was arcade video games. So Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, you know, fighting games. And I remember early on, it was, if you wanted to know what like other communities were doing, it was Usenet, right? So we were not a huge city for that stuff. Like, you know, there was, as you can imagine, like New York and LA in the US were all like the really dedicated communities were. They had like the center of mass. But if you wanted to see, that was not like search the web at that time, because this is like 91, 92 or something like that for those arcade games. And it was like, yeah, if you wanted to know what people were doing, it was not a casual thing. But then by the time of like maybe that next generation of games, so like closer to 95, 96, then it was like people were showing up to the arcade with home printouts of, oh, here's all my finishing moves. And it's like, it's just too accessible. It's like, if that was harder to get to, you're not going to win the match. So don't worry about finishing moves. But it's like, you know, like the whole point of this stuff is like, there's kind of be a bar, like you should be dedicated enough so that somebody shows you these things, or at least dedicated enough to get on Usenet and, you know, find a real discussion. Now it's like, oh, sticky thread, how to do all 300 finishing moves in the game.
Yeah, back on 92, I remember that I used to go to the arcade and they had these like 40-inch CRT with Street Fighters and joystick, and you have to wait in line to play because everybody was just trying to beat the guy that was winning. And I remember that back in Street Fighter, you used to do like a three combo. It was like a hard punch, little small punch, and an uppercut, and that was it. And I remember that I got so good at it that I started doing 4 combos, and people was like, how the hell you're doing a 4 combo? Because I used to hit twice in the air before actually hitting the floor. And it's because I got so used to the pattern of doing the same, that actually I was able just to react and do it. And nowadays it's like you go into any forum and they tell you, well, press R1, L1, R2, this and that, and that's
wait 2 frames.
yeah, exactly. You count to 1 and then just do the next one.
I remember being able to hear. So our machines in Philly generally had like, so Street Fighter 2 originally had all these glitches that were like exploitable, and ours in Philly had like not the most glitchiest versions, but kind of in the middle. So some of them were actually like game breaking, and some of them were just kind of novelties. But I can remember hearing from the button presses when somebody screwed up one of the glitches, because a lot of the glitches were like not simultaneous input, but input that is meaningless in the game. Like, if you do a roundhouse kick and you do a fierce punch at the same time, obviously only one comes out. But if they're staggered by like, a frame or whatever. But then, so like in that context, the people who are getting that information cannot execute that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I never played Tekken. I have a buddy who's like a hardcore Tekken guy. And in the Tekken world, it really could be like, here's the 18 key presses with like accuracy. And it's like, well, dude, if you could do that, you could be Googling what it is.
It's like doing this. It's all about a pattern.
Oh yeah, that's like
if you know the pattern, you can do it any way back and forth without looking at it. But
yes, I guess the internet probably ruined that too.
Yeah, it's so easy nowadays how to put it together. Like the first time I got one of these Rubik's Cube was like probably 1988, 1987, something like that. And I remember that I was trying it, and it was my cousin's Rubik's Cube, and I'm trying. And I think I only put one, the white side, but there was you had to have a book to know how to do it. Or you have to be really good at math and figure out, all right, if I move 3 times this way and 2 times that way, this one will go here or whatever. But I remember that I ended up taking the stickers out and putting it on.
There's like wild, super sophisticated physical puzzles that people do on YouTube. Did you ever stumble on any of those channels?
Yeah, it's like the guy that has like 150 pieces of a Rubik's Cube.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have to be either really good at math or you have to like know whoever built that Rubik's Cube to be able to put it together, because that guy takes like 2 hours to do it.
Oh my!
And put it together, like 2.5 hours. Like it's like 150 pieces on that Rubik's Cube. Like that's crazy, because it's like this big.
The ironic thing about the standard Rubik's Cube is like, there's people that do those like, do it for time, like try to do it in 3 seconds instead of 3.2 seconds. But the ironic thing is, so it attracts like super nerds, like extreme nerds. But the ironic thing is, since the algorithm is actually so simple, like once you know the trick of it, it's actually physical dexterity, which is
memory muscle
factor. So it's like the nerds doing the thing nerds are the worst at, right? It's like
it's like it's muscle memory. Once you know where it is, just keep doing and moving it. But
I had calluses from Street Fighter, like where your where the joystick hand hits the laminated part, and then also for like the like where your thumb hits like the short punch and short kick. We were in there all day. My close buddy, who we eventually had a falling out over like non-arcade stuff, but we hours and hours a day. And our arcade switched over to tokens instead of quarters. And if you bought like more than $1 worth of tokens at a time, you got the stupid tickets, like for the prizes, like for the other part of the arcade. And if you turned in enough tickets, you could get tokens back. So we would beat people down on Street Fighter. And when they started to walk towards the token machine, he would sell them like 4 or 8 tokens. And then he's just like skimming the tickets. Maybe then a trip to the machine. And it's like, he's like making money off like beating you down in Street Fighter. But yeah, in the heyday, we had lines out the door. And people would even go play in different arcades to have different competition. Totally uncoordinated. Like there was I believe there was no like, oh, this is like the local Philly scene hanging out on a news group somewhere. Now it would be like, oh, there's like a Philly Discord fighting game. I'm sure there's 100 of them, for each city. But it would just be like, take a bus, go to some other mall, hope that whoever the good people in that area were actually playing at that time. Otherwise, you'd just be playing some little kid who walked into the art. And it's like, why did I take a bus to, why did I go past 5 Street Fighter games to play this one?
Yeah, next to where when I used to live in Newark, New Jersey, I like in the block next to me, there was a pizza parlor and they had a Street Fighter machine. And then when that was like 5 people waiting, I used to walk to the corner of that block and go around. There was a laundromat that had one. And then if that one was full, I used to go across the street and there was another pizza place and I used to play on that one. And then on weekends, my sister used to work in one of the malls and I used to grab the bus and go all the way up to the mall and spend the whole day in the arcade playing. And then I was coming down and there was another little town, Bloomfield, in New Jersey, that I used to go to school there, and they had an actual arcade, so it was a full arcade. I used to play there, but I'm pretty sure Joseph know about arcade because down in Puerto Rico, down in our hometown, literally there was like three, and then one of them was the famous one was in actually a video rental place in Julio's Video that he had that, and then he actually was the first one that brought the hockey table, the air hockey table. So we used to, and he had pinball machines, and then he used to the owner. I know him for a while. He actually studied with my brother too. He used to scam the guys, the kids from high school and middle school.
Oh
Yeah,
we had a good scam at our arcade. Yeah. So surprisingly, like the people who did like the ticket redemption, they would also walk around and break change for whatever reason. It seems kind of stupid if you have the machines. But this one person who did it was really, really dumb. And if you just gave her like a 10 and then asked for something complicated, like $7 in ones and $3 in quarters or vice versa, just 50% of the time she'd make a mistake and 25% of the time it'd be in your favor. So there'd be people who would just keep breaking different, like bring her a 10 and ask for 8 quarters and the rest in ones and fives, and you just see what you got. And if it was under, you would show it to her and she would fix it. But then it was over, you would just like silently walk away. And then we had a thing with nickels. They were like the older arcade machines. If you put a nickel in the slot, at least in my neighborhood, and you depressed like the coin return at the same time, it would register it as a quarter. So people figured that out, and it's like only the older games. And then they would also load the change machine the wrong way, like set up the hoppers wrong, and it would interpret dimes as quarters. So every time they did that, somebody would figure it out, and we'd go to like the CVS across in the mall and just ask for like a roll of dimes and just feed it in.
Well, the way the guy, the owner of the video store used to do is like he used to have the high scoring pinball. So we used to play pinball, and every time the ball was about to crash, he used to hit it with the hand to make it pop back up before he has to crash, and he kept going it. And he got to a point that when he hit it and didn't go up, he literally lifted the machine to make the ball roll out again.
I know the electronic ones have like countermeasures for that. Like
he had it all ready for that.
He's the owner.
He's the owner. Okay. So, but then if you were doing the same thing, you're like, no.
Those are expensive machines. Holy, I could not imagine owning all those expensive machines and having teenagers and just like abusing it with like food and drink. And
actually, he was the first one. He was the first one because the thing is that his dad used to own a diner next to the video, and the whole corner was the diner, and then he actually had a little area on the store that he made the video rental, and then he was the first one to have video game rentals. He only had 2 games back then. He used to have 2 games, and then he just started building about video games, and that was like back in 1988, 1989.
We had in the mid 90s. I don't know. This guy was not making any money doing it, but he had a huge video game rental business, and it was maybe $2 or $3 for a couple nights for, not the absolute latest and greatest, but this stuff where you would, back in the day, you would buy a game and you'd be so impressed about how bad it was. Right?
Yeah, back then a video game was like $25, $30, and then if you didn't have nowhere to look at it, only in a magazine, because there was like no YouTube that you actually going to see reviews about how good the game is. And what I used to do is if you go through on the week to rent the video game, it only is a day, so you have to rent it and return the next day. But when you used to rent it on Fridays, you can return on Sunday. He gave you an extra day. So I used to get out of school. My mom used to take me to the rent for $3, $1 a day, and it was all weekend. And I used to sit down from the morning until night trying to beat the game, and that's how it used to be. Aditya says that Tekken and racing with his friends in the arcade, like super cool. But yeah, racing, if you got what is the
San Francisco Rush kind of thing.
yeah type of games that you actually competing with somebody next to you. But if back when I was in high school, like in 95, 94, when you have like Crazy Taxi came out, you got one guy sitting on it. And actually on the arcade that I used to go, this guy that used to play Crazy Taxi, if you see him sitting there, all right, you might as well just go home and come the next day and try to come in, because he was just for hours sitting there. He was just getting tired of just playing the game, and then he just stand up, because he never actually, I never saw him just fail. He just kept, he got to a point that I think one day he had like 45 minutes of time to run around, because he catch up so much time on it that like 45 minutes, and he's been sitting already for an hour and a half. So he's not gonna come out of it. But yeah, it's Aditya, yeah, you're a little bit younger than us, but yeah, arcades nowadays they're dead. So
even before COVID, they were dead, right?
Yeah, arcades right back after arcades actually was the LAN parties. I used to go meet with 2-3 guys and play together in the same house, and then after that, it's all about playing online.
We used to do that even with the Xbox. Remember?
Yeah.
Like even with when I think it was Halo came out, we started connecting a few Xbox and.
Yeah, I got one day I got on my house. I had 4 TVs, 4 Xbox, 16 people sitting playing Halo, and it was 4 little tiny, like 6x6 inches screen because it wasn't like in a 24-inch TV, and everybody's playing this little corner.
I tried to play split screen COD Zombies 5 years ago, and it's just very distracting just to see even one other screen over there.
Yeah.
Couch co-op is really like kind of garbage on like modern console. Like I see the games and it's like games for like a 4-year-old. You know, if you like Burger Time and crap like that. I'm sure somebody will tell me that they're actually awesome, but I just want like a gauntlet kind of game that's not like super brainless, you know, where you're cooperating, but very slim pickings.
Yeah, it's like I think one of my first PC games that I used to sit down and like be there for hours was like Tomb Raider, because he used to give you a hard time just looking for stuff and figure out stuff. So you used to sit and just figure out how I open this tomb, go back here and go down there. So it literally makes your brain work a little bit. But now it's like nowadays YouTube, Reddit forums.
That would have ruined like Zelda, right?
Yeah.
Like if you just would have been able to like, oh, I'm tired of walking around this map for 5 minutes.
Hey. I last week the guys that I had here, Sam and Andrew, were talking about video games back in the day. I remember that when I used to play Zelda, the first one for Nintendo, I had the magazine, the first edition of on the Super Nintendo magazine, and in the middle of the magazine, it had the map for the Zelda. It had the whole map. So I remember that I didn't have Zelda, but a neighbor had it, and I borrowed it from him, and it took me a week to beat it. But on that week, I literally found every single thing on that game. But what I was doing, I used the map, and I was just making notes on the map. Like here, I put a bomb here in this wall, and I make a hole. There's a cave, and I found the arrow here, the fire arrow. And then here, I found the bow. And that's how I figure out how to got 100% and like the piece of the heart and everything. But yeah,
that was big business for a while. Those books, like the guides, they would make you go buy, like sometimes third party. That dried up very fast when it's like, oh, I can get ad revenue by posting these.
Yeah,
I can get ad revenue by spoiling the game for everybody and showing them exactly where everything is.
The magazines. I think they literally died like back in 2004, 2005 is actually when they just literally started dying, because everybody was just literally start doing it on YouTube. And So everybody was looking how to find this piece of a map or whatever needed for a game. But yeah, it's like YouTube is good and it's bad because now everybody can just post a video about the glitches and stuff like that. But back then we had to literally find the stuff. Like it's like you were saying, the same on programming. Like Joseph was had to build his own drivers for pieces of hardware because there was no YouTube. There was no easy way out. You had to literally figure out how to do it.
And you couldn't look stuff up on your phone when your computer was down.
Yep.
Now, if your computer's down, you probably have 3 other computers in the same room.
Yeah. You got a tablet, you got an iPad, you just go and search. And then if you don't have Wi-Fi, don't worry. My phone has 5G right now because that's how it is. So, but yeah, also, Joseph here. It might look like he's only an IBM software engineer, but he's actually also a 4-degree black belt Taekwondo, and he actually is my instructor. So I took my black belt test with him. I saw the picture the other day. It was like 10 years ago, 9 years ago.
2011.
Yeah, 9 years. Yeah, 10 years ago. So you actually can't look both of us. We appear in the database from the International Taekwondo Federation. So, but yeah, don't mess with him. He can code you off with a kick. but yeah, actually, thanks for everybody that is on the live stream. If you can't get to the live stream, you can download the episode right after the live stream is done. I'm going to be uploading it into all your favorite audio podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Audible. If you got Amazon Prime, it's free. You don't have to pay anything. Just make sure you leave a rating, like or 5-star rating, so this podcast can get to more people. And just to keep on the same page, I know neither of you can talk a lot about IBM and Red Hat and what happened between it, because that's internal stuff. But in your own words, what do you think about the acquisition from IBM acquiring Red Hat, and how is the foreseeable future for the software developers, for the people that used to be on Red Hat, and how that's going to work out now for IBM and Red Hat?
I'll start with that. So when I joined Red Hat, I already knew that the acquisition was happening. It was already public news. So I made the decision to join Red Hat, knowing that it will become part of IBM eventually. I worked for 3 years at IBM and had a great experience. So I was not super afraid. There's always uncertainty when new stuff happens. The big thing here is that Red Hat, it's its own entity. We have our own HR. We have our own packages, our own system of promotions and bonuses and titles. It's all, separate from what the IBM part is, right? So Red Hat takes its own decisions in all of that. The big difference now that the acquisition has closed is that we can partner with IBM to reach other customers that we didn't have before, right? So there's IBM. When I joined, I think it was something ridiculous, like 500,000 employees. I think that's down now. They have sold parts of the business and stuff like that. Maybe I hope I'm not wrong in that number. Back in 2014 when I joined, I think it was around that. It was an incredibly big company, so many clients, so many different businesses. And Red Hat right now, it's like 15 to 18,000 employees. So we're a tiny, tiny, tiny company, resources-wise, compared to IBM. So just having that massive machine that IBM is, helps Red Hat products to reach a lot more customers. There's a lot of more options for IBM to use us and be able to sell RHEL, OpenShift, Ansible, and all the big products that we have, right, to new customers, right? So it's a growth opportunity for Red Hat. I joined when Red Hat was alone, but I knew that it was coming. So for me, the experience has been nothing has gone different, right? It's the same thing since I joined. Nothing has changed since the acquisition. We are an independent body. When you see the collaboration, it's really well done and it benefits both companies. I don't know anyone that it's affected negatively by the acquisition at all. So I'm happy. I've been there now for a year and 8 months, and I feel just like this first day I joined, as excited and hopeful for the future. I think what people are just going to see, it's Red Hat continue to grow and IBM leveraging those products. Sorry, my dog is crazy because someone just entered the door. Sorry.
But that's okay. But yeah, it's like it's just that push that Red Hat was already a big company, so now it's just getting that extra push from IBM just to reach more customers and put their infrastructure, servers, and software into other companies that IBM used to be part of as a developer company. Now they're actually branding with Red Hat to manage their service and acquire more companies that want to be more successful in have a better software developing and more people to help you out when you have troubles and troubleshoot and stuff like that.
Well, I would not say acquire. I'm just talking about that relationships that IBM have with customers. Like IBM has customers all over the world, and they use IBM products. Now they can offer the Red Hat products as well.
Yep.
And it just helps them. If they want to use Linux, they can use Red Hat Linux, and they can be exposed to Red Hat Linux easy in a much easier way because that relationship and trust they already have with IBM. But yeah. I'm a developer, right? So my knowledge of all that inside talks and how the sales work and all, I don't know anything about that, right? I am just directly into a screen and trying to solve problems.
Yeah, but you got companies like Google, Amazon that they use Red Hat software in part of their productions, like for developing in servers. So it's not everything Windows server. So they actually, most of these companies are in an open source kind of software Linux distribution. And Eric, how your workflow has actually been impacted? You got more work, I guess.
So actually, some of the stuff that I work on I have some smaller roles separate from the Apache stuff. So some of that does have like a touch point with Red Hat. And like Joseph said, it's kind of, Red Hat remains kind of independent. And most of the relationship with IBM that I personally see is just the relationship they might have with any other partner. These big corporations have, unending number of partnerships. Some of them are, purely like sales oriented. Some of them are, let's not develop the same stuff separately. With Red Hat, there's like the open source argument about that. It's like, well, if we want people to use lots of Kubernetes, let's make it easy to develop Kubernetes applications. IBM shouldn't work on one IDE plugin while Red Hat works on another, and then figure out how to,
make it together.
Yeah. So, we have some interlocks with stuff, and our president is a Red Hat guy. So we're hoping some of the open source / open culture kind of permeates into IBM. Some of the modernization of our own infrastructure, I think people Older folks might have heard of Lotus Notes. Like we still use that for email. It's a very, very old technology that IBM doesn't even own anymore, but we still use, because once something gets in place, it's hard to replace it.
Yeah, well, it's like Aditya is asking about the license fee from Red Hat, and it's not that IBM is giving Red Hat for free. It's just that pretty sure that what IBM does is just supplying their customers with the option of using Red Hat as a software to develop their product better. And the license fee is not literally just because it's an open source and it should be charged for. It's just the support that Red Hat gives to their customers. That's the whole point of charging for a license fee. It's not that they want to charge just because it's a license. It's just because it's what is behind it. It's just the way the support that if you have a problem, instead of going to a forum or going somewhere, you literally just take the phone and contact Joseph and it's like, I got this issue with this program, and they're gonna help you troubleshoot. And that's why they charge a license. It's not just because they are charging you because they're gonna give you a license and then you have to figure out yourself. It's just the support that is behind it.
I think something that people who aren't in like a middleware kind of software development company or role don't fully appreciate is that a lot of the business of software is selling it. Right? Because on the surface, Ubuntu, SUSE, at largely very similar software, right? At the enterprise management level, it's different, right? The way that your subscriptions work. But a lot of it is cross-selling and upselling and services and making sure stuff works together. So when IBM and Red Hat are acting as partners, when we sell somebody a database, we see if they need an enterprise Linux license. And then if they need help installing it, we have 200,000 or whatever people who do that kind of consulting. And then it's like, oh, do you need to also transform your business around this project? We have those kind of, so Red Hat, I'm sure, has consultants and services people, probably not to the scale that IBM does. So you add all that stuff up, and it's kind of like when you go to the mall, the salesperson at those little shops, if they sell you two things, they get a bigger commission than if they just sell you one, right?
Like you buy a bundle.
Yeah, you buy the crap at the register, they get even more. So it's kind of like the sales side of it more so than, and usually even without Red Hat in the picture, if I'm in one IBM division and I use software from another IBM division, like, for some productive use, not just on my workstation, there's usually some kind of accounting for that anyway. So I think it's likely you see the same thing for, productive use of Red Hat, because they want to understand if you have some critical part of your business that can't make money, but they support the parts of your business that make money hand over fist, you kind of want a paper trail of that. So somebody doesn't say, oh, let's get rid of these guys. All they work on is the operating system. It's like, well, what happens if the operating system doesn't work good? That's like your foundation. So I don't think it's about, oh, we're spending too much on Red Hat, let's just buy them so we get it for free. It's more about, we've got the sales team, we've got the complementary products, and the culture is supposed to be a big part. That's what some of the old timers in IBM are hoping for.
Yeah, it's like if you download Ubuntu server and you want to use Canonical, you have to figure out how to do it, because unless you still have to pay for Canonical to get help support, but if you want to do it on your own, you have to literally read and look, and then if you have an issue you encounter, like your servers are not connecting or not passing the database between them, then you're screwed, because you don't have literally a support team that helps you out with that issues. Like IBM and Red Hat, now they work together and they support each other, and when they have to figure out or troubleshoot, you can have at a hand reach somebody that can help you out with something. So it's not that you have to wait for days or probably months to get it figured out. You can actually have that machine, that power behind it for the support.
I remember at a Apache conference several years ago, somebody spoke up and said, like, yeah, we love open source software, but our boss's boss doesn't let us run anything that doesn't have a support contract. And the people we can buy support contracts from this stuff, there's no way to prove that they know what they're doing, that, you know, that they can help when some, because it's really an insurance policy, right? Because you don't call Canonical, you don't call Red Hat when I say I can't get my modem to work.
Yeah.
Right? You call them when it fails for no reason on the day before Thanksgiving, right? So these people, a lot of companies, they want open source. They want to be able to kind of look at the code. They don't want to get locked in, but they still need an insurance policy. And that's where like Red Hat and IBM kind of come in, where it's like, okay, you could drink from the fire hose and take the open source directly and self-support it. And maybe you'll have somebody at your company who's an expert in Linux and Apache and MySQL and, you know, how many dozens of things. And then maybe you'll be able to retain them. Like, even if you got lucky and you had such a person, would they stay for how long? And it's like, or you could just pay like an insurance policy, pay a vendor to give you their distribution of it, and know that when the shit hits the fan, you can call them up and get the help you need. And then when you have just a basic question, you're still, I don't know how Red Hat structures it, but for most clients at IBM for like software support, you can call for Q&A the same way you call for my system is down. It's not like, oh, you get 3 questions there. So as I understand it, there was an older model where it actually was like, oh, any problem, you have unlimited calls, but if it's just Q&A, there's like a fixed number. And then I think customers and IBM would fight over whether it was Q&A or a problem. Because obviously if asking a question, it's because something's wrong. But generally it's like, you could just ask questions, and it's like if you're lucky and your buddy is the expert in MySQL and you're using it, and you're not going to bother him. You know, you're not going to get on WebEx and have him pair a program with you all day, but when something goes wrong, it's there. And it's like companies can't have that for how complex the software stacks are. You can't have an expert. The expertise at the level of a user versus somebody who just knows the code base in and out, and you report a problem like, yeah, I know there's a 10-year-old comment that says one day we'll have to fix this. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's kind of support you get from the, you know, vendors like IBM and Red Hat.
But yeah, it's like for myself as an example. I run my own web server, and every time I had an issue, this guy down here is the one that I text because he's the expert in Apache. And whoever in the chat doesn't know what Apache is a web engine software. So everything that you see, like you open a web browser, you open Google Home, you open YouTube, you open any website that you open, either is run in Apache or Nginx. That's the power behind those websites. So he's the expert in Apache right here on the bottom. So every time I run my server in Apache, so every time I had an issue, and every time I had an issue in the database, this guy's the one that helps me out, and he's the expert on database. So yeah, and
that reminds me of a great interview question that I heard I kind of see it everywhere now, so maybe it's not so unique, and there's a great Wikipedia article on it. But the interview question is, if you open a browser and type in a URL, explain to me at whatever level of detail you're competent, what happens, right? So if you ask that to some like college freshman, they'll go, the page shows up, right? And then you might ask a senior and they might go, oh, well, it has to look up the thing in DNS, and then it contacts the server and then gets a page. But then you ask somebody who's like 15 years doing like advanced technical support, and they might list 150 things. You could start talking about memory and CPU, proxies, caches, routers, right? You could, if you were really trying to blow somebody away. And it's funny because currently the primary programming interview is like, here's a whiteboard, write some code without Google and without your IDE that you'll never write in your professional life, but this is what you need to get the job, and people cram for it. It's like a puzzle. It's like a Rubik's Cube. But personally, I think, especially if you're interviewing like somebody who's coming out of college and you're not interviewing for, you know, Apple or Facebook, I think that's going to be like my go-to question now. Like, what happens when you do that? And then if they say something very basic, say, okay, like provide more detail at every step. Like, like let them know that it is kind of a trick, right? But it's a trick in that if you studied computer hardware, you go one way. If you studied networking, you go another way. System design, you could talk about, well, it went to, if I typed facebook.com, it must have accessed the database.
Yep.
And then, okay, well, how did it find your record in the database, right? Oh, it's got keys, right? So like you could like estimate like the sophistication of somebody based on like, and you could help them along too. I think it's just much more fun than saying reverse a string, or show me some hello world page in React.
It's not reverse engineer. It's not as easy as you type something in the terminal and just get the answer back because you say just print it out. But yeah, a good example is even though it's a movie, but it's a good example, the social network and how the Facebook kind of like started, and you see how he actually
that movie.
Yeah.
Station, he had like I think maybe Apache config files and mod PHP. You can see at some point.
Yeah. So, but you get an idea that it's not just like if you open a browser and just a picture just showing up with some lines where you can write some text. It's just it's a lot behind it. It's not that easy. I actually, when I started working with PHP, MySQL, and Apache, was back in 2003, 2004. That's when I actually started trying to develop my own web server and just breaking my head up. And every time I was asking Joseph, I'm like, I can't reach the database. It's not printed on the website, but yeah, so software development is a branch. It's so many languages. Like Aditya was saying earlier, he's thinking about buying a Raspberry Pi just to start off, and it's not a bad idea. But Raspberry Pi is based on Python, so you have to be a little bit good at math because Python is a little bit mathematical equations and the way you write your software. Joseph is an expert in Java, so Java has a little bit more branches out because Java, you got jQuery and you got a bunch of other stuff that are coming down from Java. Apache is literally just the way everything gets interpreted on the way you open your website. So if Apache
that's right, that's written in C, which is the best, right? So it's like the grandfather of all the new languages. And if you know C,
execution bugs, C is the best.
C++. but yeah, it's but I think just to round up on the last question will be what I know Fedora is part of the Red Hat infrastructure. So, but now that we learned like a couple of weeks ago that centOS is going to be, this is the last time they're going to get support because they Red Hat decided just to not support their software that's open software anymore. And I know there for a fact that there's some guys that used to develop on centOS that they're working in a different distribution that is going to be close to what centOS used to be. But what is going to be with the people that already had centOS in their servers? Red Hat is going to offer them a way to upgrade their software into centOS, and so they can keep getting their support, or they just have to literally migrate completely into Red Hat. So
there's many things that someone that is running CentOS 8 can do. CentOS 7, I think, still has a couple of years more of support. But if you already are in CentOS 8, you have a large amount of options. I don't think there's any reason to reinstall, right? So it's not like you have to suddenly delete your servers and start from scratch. The nice thing about the Fedora, CentOS, Red Hat ecosystem is there's so many clones, there's so many ways that you can just change a few lines in a config file, and you start pulling the software from somewhere else. So the first thing, it's the centOS stream way, which is you're just getting centOS with a little bit of more upgrades that you would do in the normal centOS 8, right? So you might have newer packages for GNOME or newer packages for the kernel. You'll see bug fixes probably faster than you would have seen it in centOS 8. But some people don't like that because then you don't have like the same exact packages that you would have in RHEL 8, right? So that's the first thing. If you just want something that's going to have package updates coming straight from the same team that has brought you CentOS 8 and CentOS 7 so far, you probably will be okay on CentOS Stream, which is just a continuation. It's like basically a rolling release, like Arch, but more stable at what Arch is, right? It's basically before it hits RHEL, it will hit CentOS Stream. And there's guides. I think you put a one-liner in the command line and it gets updated. But if you really want Red Hat compatibility 1-for-1, you can just use Red Hat. Red Hat is free since 4 days ago. Red Hat releases a new offering for people that can just use Red Hat. And I'll put that in the chat. I don't know if you can.
Yeah. I think you can put it down on the chat.
16 cores or 16 machines or something like that.
Yeah, you can use up to 16 servers. It's what I think I read there. I think I have to log in to have the chat. I will send it to you, and you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, you can change. Yeah, you can send it to me because
so
I got my server runs on CentOS 7, so and I still got support. I think for another couple of years. I think it's 2024, 3 years actually. I think it's 2024 is when the end life for CentOS is, and usually you don't see me going into the terminal, logging into CentOS and like just this update and just upgrade all the packages from the server, because as long as you use it for the same basis, usually you don't need to upgrade unless you're developing and you have some more other stuff that you need to have on the server. Because usually I run a web server, so I literally don't update the code. I run Vue.js and some other packages I run on my server. So it's nothing that is get updated constantly. And so, yeah, for somebody that might have the need to be upgrading because they're literally upgrading the languages that they use, they have to upgrade for the latest Java, the latest Vue.js, the Nux, all those new languages packages that require a little bit more advanced PHP or more stuff like that. So they might need to be upgrading. But for somebody like me that only runs the server and is still only using a web server, it really doesn't need to upgrade. But there's an option for people that want, because actually before CentOS I started using Red Hat, and back then Red Hat used to be 7 disk. I think it was. You had to install it. It was like 7 disk.
Yeah, it was something that came in a box like this, and
yeah,
it had, I don't know, like, yeah, 7. This one has 6 disks.
Yeah, it was something crazy. You had to this one, this two. It was
but, I would say that the part of the upgrade, what you're saying, I would be, that's 100% true if it's changing between major versions. But it's something very important to keep your server updated. You should create like a small cron job that auto updates all your packages every month, because there's security vulnerabilities that get patched by people like Eric on the Apache web server, that if someone knows that you're in an old version, they can say, oh, Rolando's machine is an old version. Let's go and try to, hack it or change what it says to, I don't know, something not pleasant. So Uh,
Yeah,
it's
my
important to keep your
website, I
machine
see
updated.
Eric's face.
Yeah. We'll put Eric's face there now. That if your Apache is a little bit old, we'll find what vulnerabilities are there so we can hack it. Now, but it's important to keep your machine updated. That's what the Red Hat subscription gets you, which we are giving now for free. Red Hat is giving now for free up to a certain point, right? And from there on, if you have more than 16 servers or 16 cores, I think at that point you're a big shop. You will need support, and if you really, really don't want to pay for support and you want to be on your own, there's other options like what you said, right? Like you can go to a clone, and you can go, to any of the new clones that are there. And there's always been clones, right? I contributed once to something called Scientific Linux that our university had, which was another clone of Red Hat.
And for most of the life of centOS, it was a free knockoff, totally independent of Red Hat, right?
Yeah.
There's only a short window of time where centOS was, to me, this weird thing that Red Hat absorbed and then support. I never knew the level of support they provided, but to me, the initial state made sense and the current state makes sense. The only part that didn't make sense was when they treated it like a free version of Red Hat with maybe a different SLA or something.
Yeah, it's just CentOS is built from Red Hat developers. So the thing is that they clone. It's a clone of Red Hat, but with different package support of the community and way the distribution is done. So the thing is that Red Hat definitely has a hold to those developers. Like you can't be using my packages. You have to develop your own packages, around it, because even though they are like similar, like literally they look really similar, they're the way they're built is a little bit different. So I guess it's not a competition, but Red Hat knows that there's a lot of people like myself that use centOS, and there's a lot of companies that run centOS. For example, one of the newest companies from Canada, 45 Drives, they like to build their own their Southern neighbors in centOS. And they were the first one that said, now we can't use centOS because they sell they sell a company, they sell a product, and they use centOS. So now they still do not know what they're going to migrate to, but yeah,
companies like that can partner with Red Hat, and if you're producing a product that includes an operating system, I'm sure that if they talk to Red Hat, they can get to agreements, and ship certain version of RHEL there. But that would be something to talk with the with the salespeople, right? I don't know anything how that would work.
Yeah, there's also things like UBI, where if you build your product on top of UBI and then somebody runs it on OpenShift or runs it in an environment where they have a Red Hat subscription, then it's supported. But you can still technically use it somewhere else, because that bit is, the license allows you to do that. So there's a lot of options for people. And like I said, I don't know how long ago Red Hat took over centOS, but for years and years and years, it was the knockoff fake handbag version of Red Hat. And the only reason you used it was because you wanted it to behave similarly, but you don't want to pay anybody any money.
Yeah. I used to run my server used to be run in Ubuntu, but the problem with Ubuntu is that they just kept upgrading and changing their distribution, and to be compatible with Apache, for example. And you remember I had to text you because I had this issue and I had to change the way now the website is pointing out. And with centOS, when I switched to centOS, I didn't have that issue because centOS is more stable. They don't change the language too much. I know Ubuntu does it because they just want to keep ahead and just keep looking for new ways to develop their software. But with centOS, I didn't have that issue because they upgrade, but their upgrades in the back end, you don't see it when actually you are working on it. So it was easier for me to migrate and just keep using centOS, and then for me it was most it was easier. It's like I tried to use Fedora, but for some reason Fedora, even though I use centOS, I can't use Fedora. And I feel like I can't use it, and for some reason I can't use it. So I usually use Ubuntu as an open software when on my VMs that I got on my server. But
I forced myself to do Fedora on a laptop I keep downstairs just so I get more exposure to it. Because all my preferred Linux is Ubuntu because I started on Debian in like 1998 or whatever. So I just was always familiar with how they did everything. And then I like the rolling releases. I think Red Hat has gotten better about like version to version upgrades, but that's kind of been the bread and butter of Debian and Ubuntu is like when you're ready to move up, you just move up and you get new packages. Like it doesn't have to be complicated. I think the Red Hat process is a little more complicated to move up major versions. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, back in the day, I used to be so excited if software was updated. Like when you're using this terrible like Mozilla in 1999, you're like, oh, thank God, maybe something will be fixed. Or like your mail client or NVIDIA drivers. But now it's like, I don't want anything to update.
Yeah.
I know I have to put it on eventually, but like, software generally works pretty well.
Yeah, something gets upgraded and something else gets broken.
Yeah.
Because that's how it's kind of like that's the Windows history. It's like Windows XP, everything used to work with Windows XP. There was like no issues. Like everything used to just flawlessly work, and then they just migrated into Windows Vista, and then just migrated into Windows 7, and then 7 was a little bit stable. Then 8 was just garbage, and because then you got Windows 10, but every time I get an update for Windows 10, my NVIDIA drivers need an update, and this other thing needs an update. So, and with the good thing about open source distribution is that some of them upgrade constantly. Some of them just make a big update. They just literally wait until they are like settle into what they want with that upgrade. They just literally probably do little patches on security, but not major changes on the distribution. So
we do some of that with our distribution of Apache at IBM, and it's one of the more difficult things because there's people who, like some of the geniuses who contribute to open source projects, they want to do ultra cool new stuff. They have the capacity to rewrite entire portions of the project because they're just 100 times better than a normal programmer. But when they do that, it's not always in like a new major version. They might just do it to fix a bug. And then companies like IBM and Red Hat who are trying to maintain stability, you don't want to bring in all that garbage, but not garbage, it might be high quality, unknown quality. Hey, well, my customers want stability. They want the bare minimum security fixes, and then they'll take new function in a couple of years from now. Now your job is teasing all that apart and maintaining the differences between the upstream and what you're bundling. And that can often be like kind of like a debt that you take on, because now that same genius might fix a bug, and the fix might be tied up in that crazy new stuff they wrote a year ago. And now you have to reverse engineer it and try to figure out how you can safely get just the fix out of it. That's kind of a major source of anxiety for people.
And when you're not the actual developer, that you didn't know how you wrote the code and you have to work on it, it's just more difficult because now you have to work in something that you have to reverse engineer to make sure that it works and fix the way you want it without damaging anything else on that package.
Yeah, which might cause you to write, spend 16 or 24 hours writing tests, right?
Yeah.
Because just at some point, the capacity of your brain to understand, you can't write a proof for a patch and say like, okay, I'm now confident it's defect free. It's like, well, you better figure out all the areas it touches and hope over time you've written tests in the past, plus the new tests you write, that if it sneaks through, at least it won't hit most people. There's some stuff that breaks. I have an app on my phone that I saw some, it's like, actually Joseph has it too. Maybe his is broken. Maybe it works on you get on a scale it sends your weight to the phone so that you have like a nice graph and you don't have to like go record it offline. So the scale, like the axis, what's the vertical one? Y?
Your y-axis.
The
I
y-axis.
think so.
Yeah.
Like the values just don't make any sense. Like the chart is correct, but so it's like, and then I go look in the Android store and it updated 2 days ago. Like this from my perspective, this perfect application. And it's like, I'm sure it's related to a new feature, right? A new feature, integration with some,
Yes.
Fitbit thing. And it's like that I was never going to use. And now it tells me I'm 570 pounds or something.
That's the thing about Google Store and the Apple Store. Is just the way they are developed is so different. Like you develop an app for the Apple Store, and you develop that app, and it has to go to the Apple software team, and they have to make sure that actually complies with their information and what they want from that app. If something else doesn't get the way they want it, they return it back. You have to fix it or fix that. Google is a little bit more lenient. It's more, doesn't have that problem. So that's why some of the apps that are developed in Android gets more updated more quickly. The same with the guys are actually developing only on iOS get more quickly update because they already know what Apple wants from their apps working. Because Apple is about, they don't want to have to troubleshoot people about problems with the apps. In Android, usually it's easier because you can go to a forum, you can go to a Reddit, and I got this problem with this app. You can actually even contact the guy that actually developed the app, because most of those apps are in GitHub. So you can actually just even text the guy or send a message and report a bug on the software, and it gets fixed. But Apple is just a little more picky on the way they got their apps developed. So if you usually people that develop apps in both platforms is they have a little bit of a problem, and that's why some of the apps get more quickly updated in Android base, and iOS base is takes a little bit more time. But I got what it was IR 1980. I don't know if you heard about. Pretty sure you both have heard about XDA Developers Forum. Is usually is a forum for phones, and they help people how to sideload information in Android phones and stuff like that. And they're about to come out with a phone, the Pro One X, and it's a Linux phone. It's going to be a Linux phone distribution. So
the Parlor phone.
Yeah. So
it's funny. I had friends, pretty intelligent, not tech savvy, but sophisticated friends that mocked the whoever the CEO of Parler was, because he said two things on Twitter. He said something about Linux phones, and then he said something about, we only used EC2 on AWS. We didn't use any of their services, so we think we'll be able to move to different hosting. And this guy, more than one person, but a somewhat close friend, was like mocking, and I'm like, well, actually, like what he said technically made a lot of sense about both the Linux phone and not using EC2. Like I was shocked that the CEO, I mean, someone must have fed him that information, or maybe he got there because he was a tech guy, but it made a lot of sense. If you didn't want to be at the mercy of Google and Apple, you would want a phone that ran, an off-the-shelf operating system. Yeah. I mean, the phone is 100 times faster than my PC from, 6 years ago, probably, right? Better resolution display than any monitor I ever had before 3 years ago. But it makes a lot of sense. I think it's more about like freedom and independence from those big vendors.
It's like some people were complaining about the specs of the phone, because the Pro One X specs is like from a 6-year-old phone specs. But the thing is that Linux runs easier on any platform. Doesn't have to be the latest, because it's a light software. It's lighter than actually building like a skin, like Samsung skins One UI, or they have to build a skin over the already software that is developed for the phone and the work. So Linux. That's why you can put a Linux distribution on a 20-euro PC. And
The problem is, if you do that and you open a web browser, you're going to feel it.
yeah,
You're not going to feel it if you. So I imagine that the interface for the Pro One X, it's not just a phone, and the interface is not the command line. So my guess is that you would feel it, but so I think it's ultimately probably for like a small market.
Yeah.
For people storming the Capitol, maybe.
Nah.
Or you were sophisticated enough to say, I want to know. You're never going to know every line of code running on your phone.
Oh, yeah.
But you might trust the provenance of it. You might trust that that it's hasn't been put together by an advertising company, right? Like that might make you feel better. I actually used some of these XDA distributions. Do you remember the HP touchpad, that very early tablet that they released, and it totally sucked? Had a proprietary OS, and then they were getting cleared out for like $49 or something. So actually, I managed to get a pair of them when they were getting. It was like the PS5 kind of like scramble, but the hardware was also garbage. So even when you put the XDA, OS on it, it still kind of sucked. But
yeah, because the whole idea I know that is behind that phone is because XDA is a big forum. It has too many. It has a lot of developers that are involved in building different ROMs for phones. Like one of the that is actually most of the time in XDA, even though they have their own website and you can download it from their websites, Lineage OS, and it's one of the most compatible with like any type of phone running Android, because they build their own software. It's kind of like what Cyanogen used to be. Then they became.
Oh, that's right. That's the term I couldn't think of.
And then they became part of OnePlus. So and then the Cyanogen developers they started doing the Oxygen OS software. This is the latest phone from OnePlus, the Nord phone. And the thing is that I know that that's the whole idea behind it. It's just they don't want the latest phone, but they want a phone that they're not thinking that are going to compete with bigger companies. Is that they wanted to involve people to try an open source software on a phone. It's like Greg, one of the guys is here on the chat. He likes to mod phones. He likes to put ROMs on the phones, and he likes to put Ubuntu on most of the phones. But that's the whole idea. The Pro One X wants to be that phone that can fix a gap for people, but they want to do it in a way that doesn't kill the pocket of people. So it's not going to be the latest. It's not going to be the oldest, but they want something that works on that phone.
I never heard about that phone, but there's another project called the Pine Phone, the pine64.org page. They partnered with Manjaro, which is a big distribution from Germany. They partnered with KDE, which is the KDE desktop environment or the Plasma desktop environment, and a bunch of other different distributions and software makers. And they're trying to create a Linux phone that allows you, to sideload. You want to have the KDE experience on a phone, you'll have the KDE experience in the phone. You want to have something similar to more GTK, then you'll have that. There's things like Sailfish OS. There's more projects, different from that Pro One X. And I don't know the specs, but right. it's something they're partnering with big names, and it's just to fill that niche of, I want to be in control of my hardware in the same way you are when you have, a Linux system in your machine. The whole experience, you can tweak whatever you want. You're not locked.
Yeah, it's like I just put the specs. You see, it's a Snapdragon 835 that is probably like a four-year-old chip on a phone. It has 6 to 8 gigs of RAM, 128 to 256 with expandable storage, and it has a sliding keyboard, just like the old phones, like the HTC Pro Touch phones that had a sliding keyboard, and that's the thing, is not the latest specs, but it should run easy. And also, they already have preload Ubuntu and Linux OS, so you can use any of those two ROMs running. So but the good thing is that if it's built on a Linux platform infrastructure, it's easier to work around and fix it. Not that you have to wait for Samsung to give you a update patch. You know, you got people that in XDA that can actually work with it and develop stuff for those phones.
Well, it's like
you can build your own 56K modem driver for your phone.
it's like the access points, like the early access points that you could put the third-party firmwares on. And it's like Linux was capable of all this cool networking stuff. But the vendors wouldn't want to spend the money in writing an interface for it, you know, in the little web-based admin interface, and they wouldn't want to spend the time supporting it. So these third-party ones would like super sophisticated, like package managers, you know, they'd run on like 500 different crappy $40 access. I remember I had probably like 2001 or 2002, I had a cable internet with 384 kilobits up and like instant download. And unless you had an access point or you tuned all the PCs, you get really crappy performance, because when you exhaust the upload bandwidth with all the acknowledgements and any other real upstream traffic you have, everything would just be super slow for no reason. And then you put one of these third-party things on and it lets you access like the very basic throttling that says, oh, by the way, SSH is interactive. And then DNS and acknowledgements should be prioritized. It's like very like hello world stuff for like the network tuning that you would do in your workstation. But if it's your whole house, you know, you really got to do it in the router. You just that stuff all existed. It's not like those communities wrote that support in Linux. They just figured out a way to you know, TFTP it up to the access points.
Yeah, just make it a more easy to access different points on the phone. If you need more bandwidth for the memory, just pick it up from here. If you need storage fast to write something because you're recording or taking a picture and you need more access to your storage faster, that's the way the distribution, they just literally make it easier to work on the software. That's one of the reasons that for me the best skin, even though it's not a skin totally, is the Oxygen OS from the OnePlus, because you take that phone on your hand and it's so easy, it's so fluid the way it works. So I use Linux OS in a Samsung tab before, and it just literally it's not built for it, even though they tune it up a little bit, but you can feel that the way it is built is built for another type of tablet, like probably what is this tablet that I got here, like this type of tablets that are not so great, but they just literally basic built.
Speaking of not so great, have you ever owned a Kindle Fire or used one?
Nope, I seen it. They never wanted.
You know, it's Android based, and there's no, like, the Google apps are not installed on it, so no Google Play. Everything is very tedious. So in a world where like Amazon owned, you know, majority of the non-Apple phones, then people would be sideloading stuff like the Linux-based stuff everywhere, because it's like Amazon's going to make it hard for you to get Netflix. You know, like the thing on the desktop that says videos is just Amazon Prime Video, right? It's like you have to do all these shenanigans to get because the Google Play Store won't work without all these other essential Google services. None of them are installed. You have to not sideload them, but like, you know, download them instead of to a store. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff where I would say, screw that. I want Linux. There's a community somewhere who's going to say, You just need these basic apps. You just need a browser. You just need, some kind of basic messaging and the basic phone support. Like you don't need this thing that some billionaire decided, I'm going to get one of these in everybody's pocket and then trick them into buying videos from me and buying who knows what else from me just because it's convenient to install.
I think it was probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I don't remember why, but I needed a computer for something, and I went to Best Buy and I bought. I was like, I need something cheap, I need something fast, so I went and bought a Chrome OS Asus laptop. And problem is that even though back then it was built on Chrome OS, it didn't have support for many of the Google apps. So you try to install an app and it doesn't work.
Oh yeah, I mean, in that era, you basically had a browser and the online office. What do they call it? Not Drive, but like Google Docs. So my parents have a Chromebox. The only computer my parents have is a Chromebox in their little office, and they can't find a way to break it. Every time they've had a computer, they've had bizarre problems, Windows problems, hardware failures, but this little box just runs and runs and runs and runs. And like Chrome, all they really need is full screen Chrome. They got a Plex app, they got a Netflix app. Even those are optional, right? Because they'd work in Chrome anyway.
Yeah.
And they can't. My dad managed to turn it into like Hungarian language once, and that's like the most damage they've been able to do. It's awesome. Those could be cheaper. I kind of feel like I can get a Chromebook with a display for cheaper than I can get a decent Chrome box because they need a bigger screen and they need a real keyboard. But it's awesome for parents and grandparents.
Yeah, it's something easy, simple, and not too savvy to use. They'll have to be a techie to learn how to use it.
And if it screws up, you unplug it, throw it in the trash can, replace it, and it's just all their data is in the Google Drive. In their Chrome profile. So it's like, okay, your spreadsheet is back, your documents, your pictures, like none of that. There is local storage for something. I don't know exactly how it works, but it motivates you to put all the stuff on Google Drive.
Yeah, most likely the storage that he had is just for like photos or stuff like that you use, like if you can record yourself or something, just to have
until it syncs.
Yeah, yeah. Until
it got shitty. So we live in the same subdivision, the same development, and I have access to gigabit through AT&T and Google, and they have neither one, and they pay more for like 25 megabit down, 2 or 3 megabit up to the cable company than I pay for either of those options, and they're a half a mile away in the same name of the subdivision.
Yeah,
that's a scam going. The cable, and I guess now it's primarily cable, but cable, AT&T, the fees they charge, and that every house pays it like it was electricity or gas, and uses 0.001% of it throughout the day. Like even, I mean, now with kids doing school and Zoom and stuff, maybe it's different, but
yeah, back then it wasn't a need to have that.
Why do you go door to door? That's how you can tell it's a scam. In my neighborhood, they come door to door trying to sell you to switch to Spectrum or AT&T. Google doesn't come door to door here, but it's like they'll call you or they'll come door to door. How many computers do you have? And it's like, and if I say 40, like what does it matter, right? This is like one of the like biggest myth-based things about like people insist that even on like things like Nextdoor, where your ignorant neighbors talk about their bad Wi-Fi or their bad cable, and it's like this myth that like, oh, we had 2 people watching videos in the house, so our gigabit couldn't keep up, right? Or like, oh, I need 500 megabits, not 300 megabits because I do a lot of online shopping. It's like you would need 10,000 laptops like operating in your it's like, I don't care, like you're not watching 7 4K streams at
the same time.
It doesn't matter that your neighbors came home. And the biggest one is people conflating their wireless problems with their like internet connection itself, and it's like, come on. like this, at some point, like, they tease us for not knowing how to fix a car, right? But it's like, come on, like there's some other things you have to learn. Like what you had to learn was not fixed in place in 1950, right?
Yeah, it's just
$70 minimum. It's insane for service that has not improved that much in like years.
Yeah, it's like right here the company that I got, Optimum. They changed to Altis. It was the company that bought them out because it was Cablevision. Then Optimum bought Cablevision. Now Altis bought Optimum, and they've been upgrading gradually to 1 gigabit throughout all their the tri-state, since New York coming up to Connecticut and New Jersey. And right now, what happened is that I was paying like $186, but I had two modems. I had one just dedicated for the server, and had one for the house. So if my wife was watching YouTube on her laptop or on the TV, and my son was playing video games, didn't affect my the server performance. And I was paying like $185, and it was only 600 megabytes total. And then they actually were able to put 1 gigabits around the area, but they never offer it. They never sent me an email or anything. I was just literally glancing through their website and says, "Oh, 1 gigabit available in your area." So now I got 1 gigabit, and I paid $80 less. and I got almost twice the speed that I used to.
Our subdivision, like the homeowner association, they actually approached AT&T and said, "Hey, we know you're doing like fiber in the area. How can we like encourage you to do our neighborhood?" And they said, "The only way we'll work with you is if you promise us 100% participation and you pay us this amount of money up front to begin the work." So they basically wanted the HOA to agree that every resident would just be required to have the service. Yeah. And they just wouldn't budge on it. Randomly, 6 months later, Google decided to do our neighborhood. And then AT&T immediately decided to do the same thing. And then Spectrum had to change their like speeds, right? Because this was like back in the day, early cable modems, people would hack the firmware because all your speed limits are just like a little config file that gets set from your account and pushed to the modem. And it's like these cable companies can like trivially, I mean, back you still have to have like a sophisticated modem because the original modems didn't have enough channels or whatever, but for them to double or quadruple your speed, normally it's just like editing a configuration file. The network has such insane bandwidth, and most of the people who have the bandwidth don't use it. The ones who do use it at different times.
It's just they know how much a coaxial cable can hold, and most of the coaxial cables are only to the house. So the main infrastructure is already, most of them are built in fiber. So it's not like when we were back in Puerto Rico, we only had two companies that provided internet through cable, and the one that we in our hometown, the company that we had, it was Cablevision back also, and Cablevision, we used to have only coaxial cables, and then they start upgrading to fiber, but not everybody had fiber through their neighborhood. So you still have coming out of the pole to your house on coaxial cable, so they can only offer a certain amount of speed. But the other company that were on the east side of the island kept upgrading to fiber, and upgrading their speeds. And then the company got sold. Cablevision got sold, and now they're only like literally one company, but they only offer 225 megabytes and 5 megabytes. Like, what's that? Like, and nowadays, but there's no competition. That's what you're saying. Until Google put their self out there and decided to do your neighborhood, then I was like, oh, AT&T is like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm in the game now.
Yeah, then Spectrum, the cable company, just turns the dial, and then it's like, okay, now you've got 500. Now I'll sell you 500 megabits.
Yeah, and that's one of the problems that, for example, us in the island we had is like there's no competition, there's a monopoly, and they don't see it as a monopoly because there's nobody actually that can compete. Like, for example, if Google decided just to, hey, I'm gonna go down there and just gonna offer internet service, and they just literally have the money because the island is only 100 by 35, so they got the money to build the infrastructure there to put their own internet service. Now, those companies, that company, that Liberty that is down there, will be forced to upgrade and give it for less money. But there's no competition, and that's one of the problems that we faced when we were in the island. That there's no competition. It's only this company, and that's it. There's no competition. And
I remember we used to hear every year about how there was going to be like high bandwidth, like metropolitan area networks, and this like WiMAX thing. I don't know if you remember WiMAX, but they would just talk about like, oh, we're freeing up these frequencies, and we're not going to have to run cable to your house anymore. Like, that sounds like the idea that if you wanted to improve your internet service, that some utility has to run a piece of cable to every house to do it. It's like, it's 2021, right? Like, why is there not just one
5G.
little box? What's that?
5G.
5G. I don't know. Those plans are super expensive. Any kind of like data plan, if you tried to use it like for your home instead of, none of them are cost effective.
Yeah, it's just
it's common.
Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's about competition, and it's about who gives less for more, and that's how a lot of those companies make themselves rich. But yeah, we've been at 1 hour and 40 minutes already on.
Wow.
And so I'm just gonna cut it here for now. It's actually an hour. Yeah, almost an hour. Yeah, hour 42 minutes. So for whoever's in the chat and just came in late, thank you for coming into the live stream. And you can download the podcast and hear it later if you want. We actually talked earlier about who Joseph Marrero was and how he started with the tech. Also, Eric, on how he came from drop out of high school to become one of the senior tech guys in IBM. So this way you see that it's not roses and hearts out there. So, you have to work yourself out and everything can happen. You just have to put yourself to it. So
and use your white privilege.
so yeah, you can download it in any of the audio platforms. You can download it from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Audible. So it's everywhere. It's free. You only have to give it a rating, and just to help out the podcast to keep growing. And so, everybody, thanks for coming in and tuning to the live stream. Thanks to Joseph. Thanks to Eric, and to coming in and hanging out with me, talking about tech, talking about IBM, centOS, Red Hat, and all that stuff. So this podcast is going to be up in like a half hour after this is done. So thank you for coming in. Next week, I will have 2 more guests coming into the show. We'll still not going to say who they are, but most of the guys here, they know who they are going to be. And if you didn't look at the live stream last week, I had Sam and Andrew, Sam from Across the Podcast, and Andrew, Mr. Fat Produce. And right after this show, you can also tune in into the Across the Podcast that starts later on at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And he has Josh Quinones is going to be their guest today on the show. So tomorrow also Some Gadget Guy. You don't want to miss that either. So once again, thanks for coming in, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.